thank you very much for joining us. I don't know, everybody hasn't joined us, but I think the screen's filling up fast. Let me say we've been looking forward to Susan's talk for some time about her book and about the various textiles involving Her Royal Highness Princess Sirindhorn, who's very kindly joined us this afternoon, as I'm sure you will have noticed, and we're very, very pleased to have her with us this afternoon. I'm very much looking forward to hearing Susan's talk, not only about the textiles in themselves, which I think are fascinating, but it's also the Anglo-Thai collaborations that we've carried out with various museums in Thailand. That's something I was generally aware of, but I'd like to hear some specifics, because I think museums is an area where the UK has got quite a lot of expertise, and it's good to see that we're sharing it with Thailand, and I'll be interested to hear what's happened and how things are progressing on that score. Susan's book, I think, as we know, it isn't in the UK at the moment, it's in Thailand. Her Royal Highness has just shown us a copy, and that's the first time Susan's seen it, so that was quite an event in itself. Perhaps Your Royal Highness, perhaps you could just put the book to the screen so that people can see it for themselves. This is the book which we haven't seen yet. We look forward to seeing at some stage in the new year, but as you can see, it's not a small paperback, it's quite a large piece of work, and I think Susan and her team have done a tremendous job in putting that together. But I think on that note, I'll pass the screen over to Susan, and we look forward to hearing your talk and obviously hearing some questions as at the end of the talk. But Susan, please let me hand over to you. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Right, this talk is basically about the collections of Her Royal Highness, but I want to give you just a quick little bit of background about museums and textiles, because not everybody on this talk will know. Now, people who work in museums are specialists, and the areas that they have to cover are listed on your screen. Basically, conservation of items, cataloguing, loans and insurance rules locally and internationally, display techniques, telling stories, in other words, themes for exhibition, and sponsorship. Now, in large museums, like, for example, the V&A, where I often give lectures, you have different people in all these categories. But often, people who work in museums have to do more than one. So I'm going to show you a couple of exhibitions that I've done where I've had to do all kinds of things and run around all sorts of areas, because we haven't managed to afford, or I've worked with very small museums where they don't have the finance to have all these different specialists. And so we have to sort of work as best we can. So I'm just going to briefly talk about two stories. The first one is a Thai textile weaving and dyeing exhibition. In 1990, I decided that art students and people in the world of textiles really didn't know anything about Thai textiles. And so I decided that we needed to do an exhibition on Thai textiles for our students, for our makers, for weavers, for dyers in the UK. And the exhibition attracted a huge range of visitors. It was completely sold out. And the reason for that was it not only showed the most beautiful textiles, but we managed to persuade Thai Airways to sponsor weavers and dyers and spinners to come to Britain to actually show how these things were made. And as I said, the exhibition was fascinating. Coach loads of people from all over Britain came down to actually see the exhibition. And we got a lot of media coverage, including on programs like Woman's Hour and various culture programs and so on. And it really started an interest, particularly quite strongly for students studying in this country, to actually understand the complexity of Thai textiles and how they were made. And this was the interesting thing about sponsorship. We didn't have much money, And in fact, we couldn't afford a beautiful catalogue. So I personally produced this very small catalogue, which I funded myself, and then sold it in the exhibition and managed to cover the cost. What I wanted to do was not only talk about how Thailand was important, the skills of the weavers, the brilliance of their designs and so on, but also to put it in a historic context. And so on the cover of the little catalogue, you see a picture from an old manuscript of a lady wearing a Thai costume. And this is probably a 19th century sort of photograph. So I wanted also to tell the students about how Thailand had a great history of textiles. It wasn't just a recent thing, it went back hundreds and hundreds of years. And so the exhibition was also set in an agricultural context, because when I was doing my MA work in the 1980s, I found that most of the women only wove when they weren't working in the rice fields. So as soon as the rice was harvested and in the granary, they would take the loom down from, it was took apart, take it down, assemble it, and begin weaving. And so we talked about weaving and the rice cycle and how the two fitted together. And that was, as I said, that research I did originally in the 80s, in the 90s. And what fascinated most people in the exhibition was actually the fascination with Thai silk itself. And you know, it comes in two grades. The one on the left-hand side is actually spun off for kind of furnishings and so on. And the very fine silk on the right is actually for clothing and so on. And this also fascinated students and designers. And there was a lot of interest created in Thai silk and how it was different, very unique and different from Chinese silk and other silk from Japan and so on. And so we were also pointing out its unique quality. And then we were able to bring experts. As I said, we got funding from Thai Airways, and we had lots of spinners, weavers and dyers. Most of them came from Nan province in the north of Thailand, and they were housed by either by local people or by Thai people that we knew in the area, so that we didn't have big hotel bills. So it was all done on a bit of a shoestring, but it was a huge success, and I was very proud of it at the time. And then in 2003, just one more, it was a different sort of exhibition. It was on tribute dress and politics. It was a time when China was beginning to emerge from sort of obscurity in a way. And George Bush went to meet the president of China. And as you can see, he's wearing a Chinese jacket. And that is a highly significant, if you like, symbol of what happened at that time, because the two were almost, treating each other like equals and with respect. And at the time, I was living in America at that time, and we had this idea of power dressing, and we were all going around copying Hillary Clinton in her power trouser suit. And so we all became part of that. And so in 2004, Jim Thompson asked me if I would do an exhibition to open their new museum on the site of the Jim Thompson Present Museum. And so we called it power dressing. And what we did was look at relationships, international relationships. Now, we didn't have anywhere to put the costumes together. They were all donated by private owners and so on. And so Jim Thompson lent us their boardroom. And this is Ajahn Bill Klausner, some of whom you may know Ajahn Bill, who has always been a great supporter of Thai Textiles and the Jim Thompson Foundation and so on, and supported this exhibition. And so the textiles came in and they had to be conserved. And as I said, part of our remit of a museum person is to be able to conserve costumes. This one from the court of Rama V came in a sort of plastic bag and was handed to me. And they said, sorry, we're in a bit of a hurry, and but please can you include this costume? And so we obviously, as you can see from looking at it, it needed a lot of conservation. And the palace very kindly lent us some ladies who were skilled at repairs. And so we were able, a team of us, were able to conserve some of the costumes that were damaged. Now, we had a political and a historic take on this exhibition. So we wanted to talk about Chinese dress in northern Thailand, where some of the local leaders were given Chinese dress because they did business with China. And in this case, this Chinese robe is very similar. And as you can see, he's wearing a turban. But what we didn't have when we assembled it at the Jim Thompson Foundation, we didn't have any jewels to put on the hat. And so I sent somebody down to the market early in the morning in Bangkok and told them to buy some pretend paste jewels. And then we added them to the costume. And because it was behind glass, obviously nobody knew it was fakes. And then we also had to show costumes like this one, incredibly heavy, all backed with bamboo and all kinds of material. And a special board had to be made up to be able to exhibit this costume. So there's always a lot of problems when you're actually putting up exhibitions and doing things like this. But the Siamese influence in this case, before Thailand, it was about circa 1900. This particular costume was also sent for regional princes to wear as a symbol of them paying political allegiance to Bangkok. And so the whole exhibition was basically about political allegiances and how costume showed how those allegiances worked. So that gives you an idea of you need a story, basically, you need a story. And so work began in 2018, and we had to decide what should the story be. And we thought the princess travels widely throughout the kingdom. She is admired for her commitment to the Thai people. Her collection includes handmade textiles presented as gifts from throughout the kingdom. And so we decided that we would use a provisional title, which we pinned up where we were working. So we remembered at all times that that's what it was. And we decided on symbols of love and respect. And then I want to introduce my team. This is the team who worked with me on this exhibition. And unfortunately, I don't think they've joined us for this Zoom, but I know that it will be arranged. Convalia will arrange for them to see the Zoom. They were absolutely wonderful. We would arrive down at the Palace Museum in the morning, and then they would say to me, "What would you like for lunch?" And I would tell them what I would like for lunch. And then they would go off and organize some wonderful Thai dish. And we work very hard. And then we have a delicious lunch. And then we do some more work. And then we go back to headquarters. What we basically did was, how are we going to explain symbols of love and respect? So we chose the textiles from all 77 provinces of Thailand, because Her Royal Highness obviously visits every province. We included every Thai textile technique. And then we found photographs, a team of people from the archive, found photographs of Her Royal Highness visiting the provinces and accepting textiles as gifts. We found photographs of makers, of the people who made them. And we also tried to highlight the charities that Her Royal Highness supports. So it was quite a big sort of project to work on, because we had to bring it all together. So we started out by going through the displays at Suvarnabhumi Villa Museum, and to select textiles from every province based on this is one of the displays. There are many displays in the collection, and some of the items are extremely beautiful and really could have books all on their own, but we had to choose the 77 provinces. So slowly over a period of time, we selected textiles and we brought them from where they were stored or where they were being displayed, and brought them up in rolls to the room where we were working for selection. So that's all of them, you know, ready to be looked at. We also selected some ritual dress. This is a particular costume, which is a sort of bird costume. And we chose one which is a spirit dress and another one which is very interesting, which I'll talk about later. So we don't just have textiles, we also have in the book several displays of costume. And then we had to get Kun Joy, who's one of the team. Once we selected this, we then had to make the final decisions. And that meant holding them up, and we'd sit in a row, a bit like the Royal Academy, you know, when the pictures go through and they say, yes, no, yes, no. And so Kun Joy would hold things up and we'd say, oh, yes, we have to have that one. Or no, we can't use that one. We've already got one like that. It's not from the right province, or it doesn't, you know, and so on. So we had to be quite selective. And then the selection was made, and we then contacted the royal photographer, Kun Robin, who's standing in the shirt at the back, and the team are sat round the table. And Kun Robin and his staff then undertook the photograph of the textiles. And then Kun Robin came up with the idea that every province on the map should feature a textile. So every province, as you can see, all 77 provinces of Thailand are represented, and there's a textile for each one. So I'll just give you as an example. Chiang Mai up here shows a skirt pattern on the hem border of a skirt, which is a Chiang Mai pattern. And we tried to do that all the way through the map. And that map is at the beginning of the book. So Kun Morn and Kun Joy worked on the databases at the museum, matching the textiles with photographs of Her Royal Highness actually receiving the textiles. And that was actually quite a lot of work. It took us quite a long time to put together the photographs and the textiles. In the meantime, I should say I came back to Britain and left them with the project in hand, getting on with doing all this stuff, while I had to come back to lecture in this country. So let's start with some of the photographs. The first group I've picked here is the Thai Lu ladies, one of the ethnic groups in Thailand, in Payao province. And you can see Her Royal Highness standing at the back with the ladies in local dress. And it's basically wrap over top, beautifully embroidered, and then a woven skirt and a turban. And so the textile, one of the textiles that was presented to Her Royal Highness by the Thai Lu was a temple banner. And we included it because we wanted to have a religious textile in as well. And we also used the bird pattern as a sort of little motif on each page. So when you turn each page and you see the number, you get a little bird pattern on the top. That's just part of it. It's a very large banner, which normally is hung inside a temple during celebrations. And the 5-tiered prasad has animals representing the Himapan forest around it. I'm sure you can't see the details, but in the book you obviously can. So this was intended as a representation of Thai Lu weaving and also a representation of Buddhist iconography. And then the spirit costume, which you saw us choose, this was from Loy province. This costume really gave me the creeps. One morning, I went in very early to the room where we were storing all these costumes, and this particular costume was moving very slightly, kind of like quivering, and it really, really spooked me. And then I realized that overnight we'd left one of the fans on very, very low, and it was just enough air to sort of move the costume around. And then I realized it actually wasn't a ghost, it was the costume. But it was quite an experience, because if you look at the headdress, it's actually quite a kind of scary image. And then we've managed to find a picture of Her Royal Highness accepting the headdress and the costume at an expo in 2009. And you can see it's quite a large headdress, and it's hand painted, and it's for a very special spirit festival. Now, I wrote a book a few years back on spirits, and I've always been fascinated by what do spirits look like? Because, you know, in UK, they're sort of usually walking around with their head under their arm, or they're in a white sheet or something like that. But I was interested in what do Thai spirits look like? And so I had to put this costume in just because it's a ghost, woven ghosts, and it's called ikat. So every thread is actually woven. And this is what ghosts from Loy look like. And you can see that the headdress, the little top bits here, are actually also on the top bits. So that was a little bit of self-indulgence, just because I wanted to show some ghost pattern. We also included Her Royal Highness commitment to agriculture, which is very well known. A lot of support for all kinds of projects originally under His Majesty the King, Her Royal Highness's father, and the royal family. And we picked this picture because obviously Her Royal Highness is visiting a rice institute, a rice field research. And the costume we picked, the skirt we picked to go through it with it, was actually to reflect the kind of colours and just a general sort of look of rice fields and agriculture, if you like. And this interested me because the pattern is called red ant egg pattern. And the red ant egg in Ban Nong Bua Deng Women's Cooperative apparently is a delicacy. So the red ant egg is actually probably made into some kind of sort of pate type thing, and it's delicious, but I've never had the opportunity to taste it, so I can't tell you how it tastes.
Next time.
Sorry?
Next time I will have red ant egg to eat.
Thank you. Anyway, I just like the whole idea of a pattern with red ant eggs on it. And also because it reflected the colours, I thought. And it's a vegetable dyed, it's naturally dyed, it's not synthetically dyed. So in a way, if you look at it, you think, well, it's a very simple thing, but it's very beautiful and very subtle. And I just thought we had to include it. And also because it shows off the wonderful photograph that accompanies it. And then Her Royal Highness has also been involved in reviving and restoring patterns, Thai patterns. And this particular set we chose because it's indigo dye. And when we did the exhibition in London, in England, one of the fascinations for visitors to that exhibition had been indigo. Indigo is one of those dyes that fascinates people all over the world. You find it in Africa, in Southeast Asia, and it often has kind of magical properties. It has certain kind of, a certain sort of healing if it's put close to the skin. And so it has a kind of magical, the actual making of it, the making of indigo dye is associated with all sorts of properties to do with women and so on. So I wanted to include that aspect. And so the lady who revived the patterns, her name is on the screen now. And we chose two patterns. There were lots and lots of patterns. We chose offering tray, the one on the left, and raindrops. And I particularly, again, like the raindrops because you can see how that pattern, which is woven, does actually, you know, it's like big drops at the top and how rain can kind of trickle down and become almost like a spray. And so I thought that was actually very artistic, that rendition of indigo. And Her Royal Highness gave an audience to the Indigo Cotton Weaving Group in 2017, while the royal family were in mourning for His Majesty the King. And so everybody in this picture is obviously in mourning, wearing black. And you can see laid out on the table in front some of the patterns. The one I showed you is a dark one, because indigo can be produced in very dark colors or it can be light colors. But all the patterns that they produce and that they're part of the project to conserve weaving patterns were presented to Her Royal Highness. And then I also we wanted to include examples of national artists, which again, Her Royal Highness takes great interest in national artists, the best weaving, the best dyers, the best producers. And this lady is a very famous weaver, and she was given an audience to the Royal Highness in 2005. And I just want to show you the amazingly beautiful textile silk brocade that she made. That's the example. It comes from Royet province, which is very famous for brocade, silk brocade weaving. And so I'm not sure if this lady probably is still alive, but in 2005, she presented this beautiful textile and had an audience with Her Royal Highness. Mm-hmm. I also wanted to show you how textiles relate to history. The pattern on this textile shows a banchang pot. It's a silk textile, rather beautiful color. And you can see that the pot here is reflected in the design. And we thought that was a really interesting relationship between history and weaving. Now, we also although we included very straightforward design, we also included some very, very complicated patterns. And this one from Colosine is particularly interesting because it has so many different patterns on it. It's got hooks, leaves, lotus, naga, deer, snakes, water ferns, and it's just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And as I said, it comes from the Colosine project. It's a skirt, a woman's skirt, long skirt, and it just has so many patterns, so intricate and so fine in the design. And Her Royal Highness accepted that textile from a school, and I just think you should see the wonderful, happy faces of the children as Her Royal Highness goes by. And that's what happens. That's my experience everywhere, that everybody is so excited to be able to present Her Royal Highness with a textile. And so we included that picture really because of the children and because of the beautiful textile. They happened to come together, which is really very nice that it did. And then again, another occasion of a rice variety plantation in Maha. And we picked this photograph because the elderly lady in the photograph is tying the wrist of Her Royal Highness with a cord. And you can see here that is going on. And then the textile from Maha, we chose two. And they are silk woven, very complex designs. The one on the right is called the bamboo pattern, and the one on the left is the small turtle pattern. Now you can't see, I'm afraid you can't see the small turtle pattern, but I can assure you it does look like the shell of a turtle. And so again, it was picked because it related to Maha, but also because it's just such a beautiful pattern. And again, it's a woman's skirt. The one on the left has quite a wide border, which is very complex. And again, in the book, we actually describe how it's woven. So we give detail so that students can actually learn how it's made. And the one on the right is the same. It's a combination of several techniques all in one textile. And that makes it, again, an extremely interesting textile. Now, we also want to include, as I said, we try to include all minority groups in Thailand. And this is a group called Lao Krang, and this is a blanket, and it's woven in two parts and joined in the middle, joined here. So it's likely that it was woven on a backstrap loom, although I haven't got the detail in front of me, so I'm not absolutely sure about that. But the point about it was that it was vegetable dye, dyes, local dyes, and local cotton. And so this is at Utai Thani, and Her Royal Highness visited the weaving group, and they're displaying cotton and also dyed cotton, dyed fabric. And you can see the ladies all sitting in indigo shirts. I talked a lot about indigo. You can see they're all wearing indigo shirts. So we have the textile, and then we have examples of how it was made up. So the cotton may have been homespun. I can't remember from the details, but it'll be in the book. And then the colours were vegetable dyes. And this again, Her Royal Highness has taken an interest in not only the weaving and the making of things, but also the conservation of local knowledge on dyeing. And then we also have this costume. This costume is really interesting. This was picked for a very interesting reason, I think. On the left-hand side is how the costume is normally worn, with just very small motifs on it and in black. But on the right-hand side, it's inside out. In other words, you reverse the tunic, turn it inside out, and that's what it looks like inside, and that is worn for funeral rites. And I'd not seen before a textile, I'd not seen a costume like that before that could be reversed. So I thought that was particularly interesting and would interest not just makers, but also possibly even anthropologists or people interested in rituals. So that again is, it's just a kind of very, very interesting way of using a textile. So you think the outside is actually quite plain. It's got rather beautiful motifs on it. But when you look at the inside, this is all applique. So it's not woven, it's another technique that's used, which we also wanted to include in the exhibition. And then we also included a Hmong indigo textile using a wax technique. That's another technique which is used in Thailand, used in other countries, but in Thailand by Hmong weavers. And they use not only cotton, but also hemp. And we chose it because we actually managed to find the textile sitting on a presentation tray, waiting for Her Royal Highness to receive it. And then we have the Hmong ladies talking to Her Royal Highness about their weaving. And so it was quite lucky that we actually managed to match from the archive the textile with the actual presentation. A photograph of it. A lot of them often are wrapped up so you can't see them, but on that case it was actually visible. And this was a border patrol police school. Now Her Royal Highness spends a lot of time visiting schools around the country. We found loads and loads of photographs in the archive of visits to schools, and so we've put several into the book to show Her Royal Highness' interest in local education. Some textiles we included because we found out they were represented a particular province. Phitsanulok province has this particular pattern of a flower as their symbol, provincial symbol. And so we put 2 samples of this particular flower. These again, this is a dress length and this is a skirt. But But the interesting thing is that the pattern itself matches directly with Phitsanulok province. And then we have a picture of Her Royal Highness accepting textiles from Phitsanulok, and you can see that the ladies, both ladies, are wearing the Phitsanulok pattern. And so we thought that was, again, that was kind of significant, quite an important addition to the book, to say, you know, some places actually have their own patterns and have their own names for patterns. Now, we also wanted to include textiles that were not necessarily very skillfully made, but had some other deep significance for Thailand and for Her Royal Highness. And as you all know, in 2004, there was a tsunami which destroyed fishing villages in the south. And Her Royal Highness sponsored, there were many widows, the teaching of tie-dye to local groups of fisherwomen, particularly, not exclusively, so that they could generate income. And this are two of their products, which could be sold locally to tourists or in local markets. But the significance of that is that it was a textile created to help women who were in a time of need, when they were, you know, desperate and did not have a way of generating income because of all the destruction that happened as a result of the tsunami. And there we have Her Royal Highness actually visiting the tsunami victims in 2005. Some of the women are actually, I think, making fishing nets, but on the table there are examples of the kind of tie-dye cotton that they were producing at the time. And this was really the representation, I suppose, through a textile of what was a very tragic event. We also included textiles by the Karen. This is from Maha, right up in the north of Thailand, and it's produced on a backstrap loom, which is a different loom. Most looms in Thailand are freestanding, but there are some minority groups who work with a backstrap loom, and that means you tie the warp up onto a house post and you stretch the warp by using your back as a tension. So you have like a sort of back bar, and you sit back and you create a tension to weave. And so we included that also. And we found a picture again at a school of Her Royal Highness accepting textiles from this particular Karen group. And so there we have Karen. It's not a terribly good photograph, I'm sorry about that, but I think the quality of the photographs, because I had to use my own copies of the photographs. I wasn't able to get to Thailand to get any original copies. So this is just, it'll be a better photograph in the book. Okay. The other thing is, again, not a particularly beautiful textile, but very important in terms of what it represents. These are floor mats made from recycled factory rejects. And I think it's quite, people are collecting rejects and actually, you know, reusing them. And the floor mats are actually quite nice. I mean, they're nice. They're quite good for outside of your shower or something like that. I've actually got some myself at home, and they're easy to wash and so on. They're absorbent, and we just put that in because we wanted to show that recycling is another aspect of textiles. Now, with the Hmong people, they do produce hemp textiles. I particularly love hemp. I used to be able to buy it in rolls in the market and get it made up into jackets. It's a really beautiful product to wear. I used to buy it in either a natural colour or dyed, you know, with vegetable dyes. And these are two examples of Hmong hemp textiles from Dak province. And Her Royal Highness again has helped to support hemp production in the rural areas where they're able to grow it and market it. I haven't been recently to the market where I used to buy it, so I'm not sure if it's still available by the meter. It comes in quite narrow rolls, so you have to join it to make a jacket, but it is wonderful fabric. And that was Her Royal Highness in Dak province in 2003. And as you can see, all the people lined up are presenting Her Royal Highness with textiles. So it's rather an interesting study, because you actually see people holding up textiles, which, as you know, end up in the museum for us to work from. So that's actually quite an exciting photograph to be able to show. And then another group that we wanted to include were the Mon people from Pathum Thani province. The Mon are a group who often, we don't see much about their textiles or I've been to conferences where people have presented papers on Mon style textiles, but they tend not to be so well known. But this is a rather beautiful collar, embroidered collar, silk collar, which we found in the collection. And we thought we'd show it because it's an example of a particular ethnic group and also a specific style of textile work. And then we have a picture of Her Royal Highness with the Mon ladies, and they're all wearing these rather beautiful collars. You can probably see in different colors here. And obviously they presented Her Royal Highness with one of these in 2018. So that must have been the year that we started the project. So this is a quite later photograph when we added it at the end. And so that really is, I said I would talk for 3/4 of an hour. My 3/4 of an hour, I think, is up. I would like to say this is just the final proof copy, the cover, so it doesn't have the gold writing on it, because I signed off the proof the day I left for the airport. I got on the plane, everybody already was wearing masks, the flight attendants and everybody was wearing masks and very careful at the airport, and I took off, and obviously COVID-19 came down on all of us. And so I was delighted when Her Royal Highness actually held up the final copy of the book. So I'm very happy to take questions. Would you like me to take this down, or would you like me to leave it up so I can go back to specific images, Andrew?
I think, if you don't mind, Susan, taking it down so that we can see people who are signalling that they want to, they want to ask questions.
Okay, right. Make sure I press the right, yes. Okay.
Yes, you've done well. No, the 45 minutes passed very quickly, Susan.
Oh,
sort of,
oh good. I'm glad
flows
you
very
weren't,
well, and
you weren't dropping off to sleep.
No, I think, well, over Zoom you can see if someone's dropping off to sleep, so you have to keep your attention focused. But I think what it did demonstrate is just how much work and research work went into putting the book together. It's incredible, and how you've managed to embrace all 77 of the provinces within Thailand. I mean, that in itself is quite an achievement, and I think you've done a great job. I think I'll pass the screen over to questions, because I'm sure with all the lovely textiles, probably some of the ladies in our audience will have a number of questions for you. So let's see, is anyone looking to ask a question now? Andrew, can you see anybody?
Yes, Jill Sears, I think, wants to. Jill, you'll need to unmute.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. I just wanted to know where indigo dye comes from.
Well, it comes from.
How do they make it?
Oh, how do they make it? Well, that's
What is it?
It's grown in Africa and in Asia, in Japan, and in quite a number of countries. How do they make it? Well, it basically is grown as a plant, and then you strip the plant down and put it into vats and ferment it. And in Thailand, when I was doing my original research, the ladies make the dye, and it has a sort of magical process, and they put all kinds of things into it to make it the way they want it. So I've seen them putting little bits of whiskey into it and all kinds of stuff, and then they taste it because it has to be the right pH. And so whereas probably we would use some kind of, you know, instrument to do that, when I was doing my fieldwork in the 80s, the ladies would actually put their fingers in the dye and test if it was the right pH, and they could tell.
Wow.
And if it wasn't right, they would add more things to it. It was very exciting. It was almost like a sort of magical process, and they wouldn't let the men near it when I was working there, and they wouldn't let pregnant women near the dye vats because they might affect the dyes.
Oh.
So, indigo has a long history of very interesting you know, ceremonies that go around it and myths.
Thank you. Very interesting.
I think Peter Bradley has a question.
Peter?
Highness, it's a pleasure that I'm in the same room as you, and today has been a fascinating insight, Susan. I've really enjoyed listening to everything that you've had to say. I have two questions. One question is, where do silkworms come from in Thailand? Is there a particular province that farms silkworms? And the other question is, how do we engage a younger generation in such beautiful fabrics?
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing my fieldwork, silkworms were basically grown in the northeast in small people's houses. Women would keep you know, breed them, and I got lots of photographs. The original book, the first book I wrote for British Museum, has pictures of women cultivating silkworms. So it's very much a kind of home produce, and they would have small plots of mulberry bushes, and they'd pick the leaves at certain times of day and keep the worms on trays and feed the worms with the mulberry leaves. And then they kind of, you know, get fatter and fatter. And then after a certain number of days, they go sleepy and drowsy, and then they form the cocoon, you know, which is this beautiful yellow color, which I showed you, not white like a Chinese silk cocoon, but a yellow color. And then they have to be, they're left for a certain number of days. And then you have to spin the silk off, take the silk off before the worm comes out and eats the silk. So it's quite a skilled, you know, process. And then what they used to do when I was working in the northeast, where they were growing silkworms, they used to take the worm, collect the worms. They put the cocoons in almost boiling water and spin off the silk, and then the remaining worms were collected and wrapped in banana leaves with spices and made into a sort of pate, which is very high, very nutritious, very high in protein, fantastic for feeding to children. And then as a present, sometimes they give it, you know, they give me some and wrapped in banana leaf, and it really was delicious. It tasted like pate. But it was all part of that cycle, ecological cycle, if you like, because you had the mulberry leaves, you had the silkworms, and then you had food. So you produced silk and you had some other product from it as well. The second question, well, you know, we do our best to promote Sai-Store. I still give lectures. In fact, I'm giving one at several at the Victoria Museum. I get invited around to, particularly with students in this country. And then when I go to Thailand, I also give lectures. Obviously, many Thais know more about this than I do, but often students quite like to hear work from the 1980s, because many of these techniques, women have gone to work in factories and they no longer make silk and they no longer do all these things. And so, you know, a lot of it, except for Her Royal Highness's efforts to conserve these techniques and the patterns and the history and everything else, it is almost historical. So.
But now children, even they are in the primary school, they start learning how to weave, how to raise silkworm, and it is nice because I think thanks to my mother that she revived this silk weaving so that everybody like silk, and so they will learn how to weave. The weaver come to the palace and teach younger generation. And then
Excellent.
Is there any more questions?
Just one from me, very quick one. I was interested to see that Thai Airways were one of your original supporters. Now, their famous logo as smooth as silk, is that something that came out of shortly after they were sponsoring your initial research, or did that come later on? But it's interesting to see that the two are closely linked.
No, I mean, that was my whole thing about the beginning of the lecture. I said, you know, trying to get money is a real skill, which I wasn't sure I was very good at. But Thai Airways, no, Smooth as Silk was their invention long before we did the exhibition. But I think it helped persuade them to pay for, what they basically did was pay for about 10 airline seats, you know, to fly people over to Britain to take part. The interesting thing was, I have to tell you this because it's really a sort of against Thai Tourist Authority, but we went to the Thai Tourist Authority in London and had a meeting with them and said, please can you sponsor this exhibition, because, you know, it'll invite tourism to Thailand. And the response at the time, it was, I think, probably an all-male group of people in the embassy. They said, in the, Thai tourist office, they said, oh, no, people come to Thailand only to go to the beach and play golf. So they didn't give us any sponsorship. But actually that exhibition did lead to people traveling to Thailand to look at fabrics. A large numbers of, you know, weavers and dyers and all sorts of people joined groups with somebody leading it, you know, to go and visit villages and so on where people were weaving and dyeing. So it did generate some tourism. But,
absolutely, and Thai Airways certainly got their money's worth out of their initial sponsorship anyway, because the Smooth as Silk is something that everyone associates with Thailand, and I think it highlights the importance of silk within Thailand. I mean, how important it is, and I think your book goes on to sort of build on that relationship. If there aren't any more questions, I don't know, Andrew, could you see if anybody else has got any last questions?
I can't see anybody at the moment.
I'd just like to end by again, thanking you, Susan, for such an interesting presentation, and we look forward to seeing your book eventually when it finds its way to the UK. But also to thank very much indeed Her Royal Highness Princess Sirindhorn for joining us this evening. I'm glad the link stayed in place. There wasn't any technical issues, because you never know with this sort of thing. But it's been a great honour and a great privilege for the Society to have you to join us with us this evening, and thank you very much again. It really is appreciated, and I think it helps cement why the Society is built on fostering a greater relationship between our two countries, and we're very grateful to you joining us this evening. Thank you very much indeed. Kok and ka.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think people will probably start taking their leave now, Your Royal Highness. So if you've got your technical team there, they can probably withdraw. But thank you very much again, and all the very best for the future.
Yes,
Valia.
Valia is coming.
Valia. I couldn't quite see very clearly.
We all come.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, thank you, Susan. That was great.
Yeah,
It's the last of the current series of Talking Thailand, but how nice to go out on such a great high.
Absolutely. It couldn't be better, actually. No, it was really, really, very, very good. And thank you for your presentation. Your presentation came across very well. And as I said, 45 minutes flew by. It wasn't long and drawn out by any means. And I'm sure you could have gone on for much longer as well. But you covered a lot of ground, and it was very, very interesting. Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much.
Good, pleasure. I enjoyed it. And I think, 45 minutes is enough, actually. Well, it is with students. They all start dropping asleep after 45 minutes. So.
No, I think if you can hold people's attention for 45 minutes, you've done pretty well, I can tell you.
Thank you. Okay, I look forward to seeing you all, not virtually, when we've all been injected with the antivirus.
Yes, and we'll see when your book turns up. That'll be very interesting too.
I'll communicate with you. I'll communicate with you when it does. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'll tip off the Thai embassy. It's on its way, so they can keep an eye out for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kanorpin.
Thank you. Happy
Bye, Mark.
Christmas, all. Yes.
You're well, but you're well.